We're joined by Jimmy, who started off also a Drexel alum, and he went from heading a student org to being, right, essentially, right, of some of the top companies in the world. And so, without further ado, Jimmy, why don't you do us a favor and introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, name's Jimmy Hawk. I am a Drexel grad, 2010. I studied mechanical engineering. Along that time, that's when I met Alex. So nice to see you again, Alex. It's been quite a journey. It's been 15 years now. So studied mechanical engineering, ended up being at some of the larger defense contractors. Funny enough, I actually graduated and went into pharmaceuticals working at GlaxoSmithKline. Then I went into defense contracting over at Boeing, and then right now I'm at Lockheed Martin. So a little bit of a journey, but it was a fun one.
And dude, that that's that's quite a resume, but let's rewind this down a little bit, right? Let's start 3 Drexel years. So just to kind of better understanding, what should people understand about you to get a better understanding of who you are as a person?
I think your degree doesn't matter too much, to be frank. I think you really can do what you set your mind to. I think a lot of people and a lot of companies they will put, they have a requirement that you need a bachelor's degree. And that's kind of telling that you can have any bachelor's degree, but that's enough for them to say that, hey, you can actually perform this job. But I think what I mean by your degree doesn't define you is that, at least in engineering, I think what happens is that you are trained on how to think, how to solve problems. There are stereotypical engineers who are very reserved, very, they're just doing their coding, their engineering, very set on their ways, right? So that's some of the stereotype of them. But there's an element of solving problems, which is you need to be able to communicate and connect with people in order to solve a problem. I think solving problems, um, you really need to be able to kind of reiterate what their problem is better than they can to understand their pain points. And this goes to not just solving problems, but towards sales, towards marketing, right? I think in that same vein, connecting with people and understanding human behavior is a big part of what got me to my position. Is that I did all of that technical stuff for many years. I did all the design work, but at the end of the day, what my strength is being able to connect with people, no matter who they are. I don't care if they are a director, VP on the C-suite, but and that is actually what my job is to be able to bring people together, no matter the function or title, and be able to solve problems. So I think, during that whole journey of finding myself and getting to that point of connecting with people is what I really excel at. Um, I think that had nothing to do with my degree and more to do with what I wanted to do in life and finding out who I was as a person.
Now, where did that start from? I mean, for me, my context was seeing you within ASA, and then eventually you took over in leadership. But there that has to start somewhere, right? Where's that start? Where's that seed start from?
It's funny. It goes back to being a child of immigrant parents. Probably you can kind of put it that way. I I'm sure you are first generation Asian American too. Um, but that whole pressure of immigrant families, making sure that you succeed, like the way that they prep you. But there along the way, there's a lot of ups and downs, right? There's some sort of resentment of, hey, I don't have this normal lifestyle as my American friends who are not first generation immigrant upbringing. And I think what happens is, you know, it really depends on the person. Some people they want to live up to the expectation, or there's an element of trying to prove yourself, like not even to them, but to other people. I think um, being a minority growing up, I was in basically an all white school, a Catholic school, and there's a element of like you don't really fit in. And for some people, that may put you down. So other people, what would happen is you want to really succeed no matter how you get there. You want to prove people wrong, and I think I kind of took that path of, I am very success oriented. I whether it be it's whether it be like not really monetary, but there's some sense of feeling of, hey, you succeeded in life, right? There's an element to that, and that gets very psychological because I think as humans we're always chasing a goal, and so that journey to being successful in life that will never end. But I think that kind of upbringing, wanting to be successful, kind of shaped me into how do I succeed, and then you come to this point where you may have some level of success, whether it be you land a job or you're in a position that you was working towards, and then you come to crossroads of, and that's where you kind of have to find yourself of what do you want to do, because at any point, for most people that went to school and they went to a corporate job, especially in engineering, you're going to get to a point where, hey, do I want to go technical or do I want to go managerial, right? And so nowadays there is a mix of those two and somewhere in the middle, which is kind of where I'm at right now. Um, but I think along the way of wanting to be successful, proving yourself, I think there's a drive for whether it be status, power, or just the feeling that you think that you're successful, which kind of escapes a lot of people, at some point.
We're gonna want to harp in on that later because I think you're right in that the earliest iterations is going to be some kind of monetary or superficial material thing, and as we get older, there's outside of basic securities, I think there's more to that, and we realize that hopefully not too late, but there is a realization for most of the people in our age groups, and again, there's unfortunately some of my friends they realized it a little too late, and there are certain things that they had to forego, uh, for the rest of their lives, and that's just the decisions that they live with. But in terms of your early starts, then why Drexel?
I want to say it is mainly due to the whole co-op experience. There's a lot to it though, right? There is I was born and raised in Philadelphia, so it's a local school. I mean, most of the schools I looked at were, UPenn, Temple, Drexel, and outside of this area was only Penn State. Um, I didn't get into UPenn, so I applied. It's funny. I applied for early admission, got deferred, and then went towards the normal application and got denied. So I felt like getting rejected twice. So I think if I did get into UPenn though, I probably would may have gone the business route. But at the end of the day, I think the whole Drexel co-op program and allowing you or having a requirement that you need to you know com- actually work, get internships, really sets you apart in the job market. So I think, to be honest, I think that really set it apart, and I'm glad I did it because I don't think I would be here without the co-op experience.
Why do you think you would have been a business major? Just curious.
Mainly because UPenn is more cared towards business. Really, I think its strength. It's kind of like you can. I think Drexel has a lot of good majors, um, but you know nearby to Drexel, right, was USP, University Sciences of Philadelphia, right? That's the third school in University City. It's kind of like you wouldn't go there and become I don't know, civil engineering major or something because it's more catered towards healthcare, uh, especially pharmacists. Yep. So it's kind of like you'd want to go to schools that are, if it's like an Ivy League school and it's reputable no matter what major you are, but you'd want to go to schools where that's their strength, right? A big aerospace school down in like near Daytona, Emory Riddle, that's like the top aerospace school in the country, in the world. I don't know, but that's where a lot of aerospace engineers go to school. So it's kind of like, why would you go there and then study something that's not aerospace.
It's like it didn't matter. Like it almost seems like in your brain the major didn't quite matter. Like it's just right. Like or did it?
Because I think when you're at that stage of applying to school, you I mean I did switch majors, but funny enough it was actually within engineering. But I think when you are a freshman in school, I've seen so many people switch majors. So I think at that time in high school, trying to get into school, there's still a little bit of uncertainty of what major are you going to go, go in. Um, but it's one of those things where it's like you see the landscape and you see what the strengths of that school provide. Like if you go to UPenn, then business. If you go to Drexel, you can basically do anything. So and that's more of why it doesn't really matter because of uncertainty of you just are ignorant and just don't know of what you want to do in life yet.
But you could have certainly been a business major in Drexel. Why engineering?
I think for like my aptitudes, I think in school. So I guess a little bit more history is that I got into Drexel as a software engineer. And the reason why I applied as a software engineer was because I liked building websites back in the day in high school. I was the graphics design editor in at Central in high school. Um, so I was on the website committee, did a lot of that stuff. I thought I loved coding. I did it on my free time. So I don't, you probably remember, but back in the day, Zanga, that was the blog that died a long time ago, but that was a fun time back in those early 2000s. But Zanga had like a default style of how you want to show your blog, right? But I found myself creating custom designs, doing custom coding to make it look completely different, and that was what I did for fun. Um, and so that kind of little coding hobby, right? That kind of translated to okay, maybe I want to do something very similar, which was software engineering. So then I got into Drexel as a software engineer, and then I changed to just general engineering, I think, or I switched directly to mechanical. And the reason why is that I thought, well, I don't want to sit in front of a computer all day. I want to do something with my hands. And I thought, what I really wanted to do was work in for like an automotive manufacturer, so like and design concept cars. So sometimes you'll see commercials on TV that they unveil some new model, right? And in doing so, they had to do a lot of CAD work. So this kind of falls into the whole graphics design is that I like to, create designs and models, and then you would mold it in clay, like the cars, and you would mold it in clay and then actually have it manufactured. So that to me was what I really wanted to do as a mechanical engineer. So you had this um, element of doing actual modeling and coding, that kind of engineering and design side of things, but then you were a little bit more hands-on. But here we are where everyone sits in front of a computer all day anyway. So here we are. Yeah. But like even now I kind of regret sometimes I regret not going into software. I mean, you just look at the world around you. I mean, it's good and bad. Like you kind of live with the consequences and you kind of back your decisions, but I mean, I could be working for Meta right now and been part of the 2020 uh ramp up of hiring how many X number of employees, and then been part of the whole um, the uh, the layoff, the mass layoff on from every single software company, right? Like I could have been a part of that. So, who you tend to not like regret too many decisions like that, but I like where I am, and
I don't often bump into people where they can legitimately operate at high levels with different things. Usually, people find a thing that they're good at, especially when it's technical in nature, and that's kind of it. I, I think part of me is wondering how much, or my suspicion rather, is I feel like you have the ability to jump from one thing to the next. I think your brain capacity allows for it, and so there's a little part of you that thinks, "What about that side of the fence?" Right? At the very least, right? So Drexel is known for their brutal engineering. Well, they were. I don't know what there is now. I'm assuming it's the same. But
yeah. Well, it was so brutal that they got rid of their existing program that I went through when it was called TDEC. The year after my freshman year, they got rid of it because I think it was like a 60% failure rate, or it was 60% of folks either failed out or switched majors. Yeah, it was a lot.
You went, I mean, straight through and through. No points of like, am I doing the wrong, like, did I just make a mistake picking this major?
Yeah, I guess I was fortunate enough to not have done so, and funny enough, kind of to what to when you were asking me, the major didn't really matter. Is that you start getting into it, and there was always this little bit of a competition between engineers and business majors of as an engineer, we always thought that, wow, business majors, it's so easy. One, it's so easy, and two, you guys have so much free time. And it felt like that from a lot of the people that we hung out with. Whereas, like a lot of the engineers, we were in labs, we were doing reports, we were doing uh, a ton of stuff. And it goes back to what engineering, the curriculum at Drexel, it's really teaching you how to solve problems. You get to a point where most of your exams are all open book anyway. Like once you hit junior or senior year, almost all of your exams are open book. And the reason why is that, in the real world, when you're actually working, you have all these resources available to you, but it's up to you to figure out how do you solve that problem and how do you arrive at a solution with all these resources. So it was, and that being said, I use almost I definitely use nothing that I learned in school, both at Boeing and here, to be quite frank. So it really kind of hones that message of engineers are really taught how to think and solve problems.
Hmm. For me, it's been some time where, like, one of the things as I go through these iterations of whether I'm trying to mentor people or just, you know, help young bulls out, I try to distill down what are like the few things that you should really use as your keys to success or whatever. And for me, it has been problem solving. Say interpersonal skills. For me, I still distill it down. That's a problem solving skill. How about succeeding in a marriage or any relationship? Problem solving skills with the caveat of part of that problem solving skill is understanding and properly identifying what the problem is. So, for instance, in relationships, it's a little more complex. Sometimes it's not about the spilled tea. It's not about the laundry that's got left in. It's something underlying. So, if you're going to try to problem solve the thing that you're fighting about, you realize that it wasn't about that. It's about whatever. It's a proper identification, right? Sometimes there's an underlying cause that is feeding into everything else, right? And you are interesting in that when I think about engineers, I think this is going to be people are probably going to roast me later, but that stereotypical dude of like, we need to fix the problem. I'm like, that's an engineering brain, right? Now, I think engineers also think of the tactile face value thing that they're looking at. That's the problem we fix. And I'm like, okay, so you're probably not going to get to like, upper middle management or higher or like, or whatever that level of seniority is. You're probably going to stay grunt level, man. Because you only see the problem in front of you and you don't think 3, 4 steps ahead.
It's funny. There's two little things I had to comment on that. One is, um, in engineering we do something called root cause corrective action, and that may not be just in engineering, but it's just problem solving in general, right? Is that there's a lot of tools out there for really dissecting a problem to find out what your root cause is, because you want to figure out if it's a systemic issue or if it's something that's at face value. It could be, there's something on a factory where something keeps breaking. Maybe it was a design issue, not a tool issue. There's a lot of things along those lines. But the other thing I wanted to mention about that you had just mentioned about, um, not just solving the problem, and how do you really communicate and connect with people. There's this little funny video, and maybe I'll get roasted for this too, but there's a funny video. It's called "It's Not About the Nail," I think. Basically, it's like this little short, where a woman, she has a giant nail in her head, and and then the guy, her husband, significant other, or what have you, he says, I could probably fix that if I just take the nail out of your head. And she goes, no, it's not about the nail. Why do you keep trying to solve a problem? I just want you to listen to me. And so, and he keeps on going, but everything will be fine if I just take out that nail. But what it refers to is just the different dynamics of how males, females, different people of all backgrounds, how they interact from with with each other, right? Like you can't have a, hey, I learned things this way. This is how we need to solve the problem. Um, no, you can't do that. You need to be able to take it from different different points of view. Like if you're trying to solve a problem with a little like a toddler versus a grown adult, you're going to approach that differently. So I think a big part of problem solving and something that I've strive on is really connecting with that person and figuring out their point of view, what makes them tick, what is the real pain point in their eyes. Just because you think you can solve a problem does not mean that that's that will be the proper way to approach that issue. So it really has a lot to do with being able to connect with people. I think you really need that trait, and that doesn't mean that you can't learn it. I mean, there's a lot of tools and seminars or whatever that can help you learn a lot of those attributes, but it's one of those things where if you put a focus on trying to learn how to communicate better, you'll be able to do it.
Is that something you picked up along the way in your career? If so, what? I mean,
Like, I was always mindful of those kind of things of how are you perceived by other people, both on a personal level and also on a professional level, right? I think funny enough, I think when you're as a guy, or maybe it's not everyone, but some guys, right? Like when you're younger, going through the dating phase and trying to get a girlfriend or whatever, I think guys at that stage and even females that you are a little bit more, there's a little bit of self-discovery and you're always kind of afraid, hey, I just got rejected, or what if this person doesn't like me and whatnot. And that does translate to the professional world, in a little bit of a different vein. But I think that kind of trying to figure out why someone doesn't like you or does like you, I think that kind of adds up over time. But in the professional world, I think what happens is you, once you're right out of college, you're going to have a lot of, hey, I feel very new. I don't know what I'm doing. Hopefully, I don't mess up, kind of thing. And there is an element of trying to please other people, right? Do a good job. But then again, at the same time, some people don't care. But I think where I was, there was a not like a real turning point, but a lot of feedback. In most corporate jobs, you're going to have a end of year discussion, end of year review, and even along the way, you will probably get feedback, both positive and negative. But I guess I was maybe fortunate enough that I was in the role where I did have to do a lot of communication. I was working, here based in Philly at Boeing. I was working a lot of projects where it was all on the West Coast. So I was um, I was the 777-9 electrical design lead. So we have, it's still being produced right now. We're trying to get certified. But most of the engineering and production, it's all in Everett over in Washington, which is just north of Seattle. That's where the Gigafactory is. So in that factory, there's all kinds of folks, they have all kinds of backgrounds. But one of the guys I worked with, um, he was also another engineer, but he was a little bit higher level. I remember a very candid conversation where I wrote a very detailed email trying to explain the problem and the solution and all these little extra nuances, because I think as an engineer, we try to add a little bit too much detail because we try to think of every single possible scenario. And and there was a comment that he made was, Jimmy, your emails are way too long. I'm not reading all that. I'm like, what? But this gives you everything you need to know and the answer. And then it kind of, that one conversation I still kind of preach to other newer people and also to anyone who has a little bit of trouble communicating, is that you really need to know who your audience is, who you're talking to, and what their perspective is, right? Is that he's a little bit higher level. He doesn't need to know every single little detail. He needs to know the bottom line. So there's a thing in corporate where it's called a bluff chart, which stands for bottom line upfront. So before you get into your whole slide deck and presentation, you'd want to kind of summarize what the end goal and bottom line is of this whole presentation. So I think I see that in a lot of people I've trained, especially engineers, where they might get a little bit too detailed or no detail, but I try to guide them in that recognize who your audience is. You might frame your answer in a completely different way if you're talking to an executive versus a peer or a manager or someone else, right? So I think understanding where other people are coming from and who your audience is that you're talking to, I think that plays a very major part in success and effective communication.
Well, let's talk about successful skill sets, shall we? You look. I'm gonna harp in it again. I see GSK. I see CDI Aerospace. I see Boeing. I see Lockheed. Like in your mind, what are the contributing factors that led you to having these series of successful employment opportunities?
One of those things where you can look in other peers, and sometimes I'll say, well, I'm not that successful. I'm sometimes, and I still feel like I am not exactly where I should be or want to be in life, especially as when you start gauging by age. I know right before I left Boeing, my director that I was reporting to actually went to Drexel too and graduated a year after I did. And that was kind of telling that, well, I'm a level 4 and he's a director. How did that happen? And I had a good conversation with him, and you know, it's uh for one, he's actually really good at what he does. But number two, there is luck that is involved. He managed to get an internship at Boeing, and then he became a direct employee right after he graduated. Like a couple years after, his manager retired and suggested that he should apply for a management position. And he got it. Then his senior manager, same thing, retirement. He applied, he got it. Then he started working with a director. Then a new position was opening up. That director recommended him to take it. He got it. So there's an element of luck because we kind of went through the same, not the similar path, but it was luck based. Um, and that was it's he's actually really good. It's not like I'm taking anything away, but I think if I were in those same shoes, maybe I could have been a director at Boeing at this point, and I wouldn't be at Lockheed right now. Who knows? But I think along the way, everyone's lucky in their own way. Um, the way I even got to where I am has to also do with connections, and I think I've whenever there's a career fair opportunity to kind of do one-on-one or roundtables at work, I usually do participate because I think I've learned a lot along the way that I always want to share with other folks, especially if they're young. So one of the things I did, and everyone has always heard, make sure you build connections, expand your network. But when you're in college, you're kind of like, how do I exactly do that, right? And you don't realize those connections until it could be much further along in your career. But I will say that when I was at Drexel and I graduated, my first job was at GSK. Like that was pharmaceuticals. It wasn't mechanical engineering, but they were hiring a lot of engineers because they know how to think and solve problems. Right, that was what we're trained to do, and that was kind of their model is to hire a bunch of engineers, have them work the factory. So we were doing biotech, which we were working on a type 2 diabetes drug out in Conshohocken. And so a lot of us, we were all new engineers. And then I was on night shifts from 5 p.m. to 5 a.m., which was pretty brutal. So there were 4 shifts and you would alternate. But so it was fun. I made a lot of good friends and good connections. But at some point during those 2 years, near the end of 2 years, everyone was applying to the same engineering jobs within GSK. And there would only be like one or two openings, right? So competition was super high. But I studied mechanical engineering. I've always still wanted to be in automotive or aerospace. I thought about automotive, but everything is in Detroit, and I am not moving to Detroit. like for so many reasons. But Toyota, I tried to get an internship at Toyota before, but a lot of Detroit. No, I'm not going to Detroit. So locally was Boeing. Um, like there weren't too many, right? Boeing, Lockheed were the main two that you had, and this goes back to kind of knowing what majors to go in because at I graduated with like 300 to 400 other mechanical engineers, not even including electrical, and there would only be like one or two open spots at Boeing, and you had everyone with the same resume all applying to the same positions. It's very, very hard to get into Boeing, especially in Philly, right? So you have to be very fortunate and lucky to even get an interview. So where I got lucky was that, and this goes back to the connections, is that when I was in ASA, um I had a buddy. His name was Kyle. He was a co-op, so he was younger than us. He was on the ASA flag football team with us during the Rice Bowl, if you remember that. It's one of those things I set up back then. Um, and he was on the team for ASA, and we got to know each other because he was also a mechanical engineer. And so he started co-op with the company called CDI Aerospace. And one day I was like, thankfully for LinkedIn, I'm like, yo, Kyle, you work at CDI, which is working for Boeing. So it's basically the same thing as basically working for Boeing. And then we talked, and then he forwarded my resume over to his lead. And then from there, I got an interview, and then I became a direct employee for CDI. Um, so that was not really luck, but it's you had a connection. I had a connection with Kyle, who was there, who helped me along the way. But there is an element of not just luck, but of actual skill because throughout the 4 years I was at CDI, which is at Boeing, I made a name for myself and I was able to get a direct position from my work and my reputation for being at CDI. And then that's how I became a director at Boeing. So, it was a long journey from 2010 to 2016 to become a director at Boeing, but it was through a connection.
It's the work. It's the work. There's, I mean, for me, that's a kind of low key hack, right? How many people would think to go with, like for me, it's like go to a sister company, a sub, a subsidiary, or anything like, for oftentimes it's like, oh, I need to work for this company. I sent an application to this company. I got rejected from said company. I'm going to do it again and again and again. And sometimes it works, but other times it's like, this sucks. I'm like, have you thought about going adjacent to?
Yeah.
And like, oh
Like
no.
there's so many other things in that same vein. Like no matter what industry you're in, right? You don't need to go for the big name right away. You should still try, but I mean, a lot of them are looking for experience. So get experience elsewhere. Get that experience and then apply later on when you are well equipped.
Yep. And I think this is where, look, I think it's coming back where, a lot of young folks, and I'm hearing it a lot now, they're having a hard time getting a job. And the recurring thing that they keep asking is like, hey, how do I do this? What am I supposed to do? And I think back to, we graduated right as the great financial crisis kicked off, right? The great housing
Yep.
crisis where, everything was going down the toilet and everyone was having a hard time getting a job. And it's like that now it's hysterical where it was like for an entry level job, they wanted 3 to 5 years of experience and they wanted you to have a
Yep.
master's. I'm like, huh? And it makes zero sense. And I was, we somehow managed, but like, I still distinctly remember I was working. Well, I'll just leave the name out, but I was working somewhere, and I would see the hiring applications, and I got to a point where, like, I guess I was just, I'm like, I don't, ex- explain this to me. You can't lie to me. I did the job. I graduated from that job. I created these jobs. How are you going to tell me that you're requiring a master's degree and all this? And like a high school kid could do this.
Yeah.
It's a very basic skill set. It's not rocket science. It's can you run a basic Excel spreadsheet? Like do you know how to do basic
Yep.
like that? This is ridiculous. This is crazy. And
Most industries really are on the job training. I feel like most people can do a lot of things I did in the past.
thankfully, I do see I see it more over the. I still don't think it's prevalent. Maybe it's different by industry, but still, thankfully, I see a glimmer of hope where it's more of what provable skills do you have in your tool belt as opposed to what credentials do you have. And I think for me that's huge. Um, and now that AI is becoming a thing, and for me, I tend to be in the camp of right now AI isn't gonna be earth shattering, but I also am a firm believer of exponential development, growth, or whatever the hell you want to call it. Like right now, I don't think it's gonna be upending the job market entirely, but I wouldn't be surprised in 10, 15 years, like this world is not what we recognize, right? But so
Yeah.
it's one of those things, right? I know, like when I talk to parents lately, and even conversations regarding my own, there's a little bit of look. I get it. We grew up in an era where the thing to do was you go to school, go to college, get a degree, get a job, get a better job, maybe go back to college, get more degrees, right? And I'm like, I don't think that I don't like unless you have some, you are picking a job path or career path that requires some kind of certification, a doctor, a lawyer, whatever. Honestly, if you're saying like Johnny wants to go paint and do sculptures, like don't send him to college for that. For what? For what? For what? Or they just because they have no direction, you're gonna force them to go into a business degree. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, me personally, I'm like, I'd rather have my kid learn a trade straight up. Or if they know if you notice that they have inklings towards like programming or understanding engineering things, lean into that. You don't necessarily have to get a degree for that, but honestly foster the learning if even not on an academic level, like have them pursue that, chase it down, master a craft, you know.
There's so many good things that you just said there. For one, the whole you must go to college thing, I think it's stupid. It goes back to you get a degree just to get a degree, and now you're in debt. And what are you going to do with a degree just to say that you have a degree and doesn't do anything? But I think trade schools right now, like you need, right? We need to. I think society needs to recognize that with that whole sentiment of you need to be in school to be successful in life, that kind of fuels the fire of, hey, who's working in the factories now? Who's your electrician? Who's your plumber? Who's going to do all the actual um, trade work that's needed to actually have society to keep progressing for infrastructure and things like that, right? If you're in a trade school, like becoming an electrician, plumber, or whatnot, right? I think you're starting out over six figures at this point. And reason why is because they're in such high demand. You see and this kind of goes into a much deeper rabbit hole of like I do a lot of things on the side, a lot of entrepreneurship stuff, but um in our generation right now with all everyone going to school and college, there's a big gap from the boomers, right? And that gap is that all those small businesses, whether it be a landscape company, an accounting firm, um, an HVAC company, there's a really random business I just learned of that cash flows like crazy, and it's sometimes like when they lay out cement underneath, like for actual supports and not produce sinkholes and stuff, they'll inject foam underneath cement to provide a solid foundation. That's a old business model that no one would ever think about starting, right? But those kind of companies, they're making like millions, like stupid money, cash flowing like crazy, and it's like super boring. So I follow a lot of these, these there's one girl on YouTube, and she's been kind of blowing up on a lot on social media. I think her handle is like your rich BFF or something along those lines.
Vivian, your
And
rich
she,
BFF.
yeah, yeah, that's her. And
Shout out to Vivian.
she does talk a lot about that,
Mhm.
about how, you know, there's so much to learn from her, but one of the things is, boring businesses, talking about finance. There's so many topics that we can kind of deep dive, but you don't need to go to school for everything. There's so many ways of making money in so many different industries or methods. Like influencing was not a thing until, recent years. And just to go back to AI changing, like no matter what landscape you see the job market in right now, there's always going to be a way to make money, and a lot of it's predicated on, are you solving a problem, right? Like going back to those old boring businesses, those are solving a problem. Laundromats are solving a problem. The cement thing, injecting foam into cement, that's a real problem. So, if you own a house right now, like I know if I call like the bigger HVAC companies, it it costs you an arm and a leg to get a diagnosis and a fix. And there's a whole marketing ploy behind that, I know, right? But it's still super expensive. So, for a lot of the younger younger kids that are still in school, don't know what to do. Um, and even, when you're still in high school, if anyone from high school is watching for any by any chance, is that you don't have to go to college. Like, try to find out what success is for you. Try to find out where do you want to be in a few years. Like, how do you actually want to be happy? Because at the end of the day, are you able to eat? Or do you have a shelter, and food, and everything? Like, how do you get there to cover your basic financial needs? And then how do you kind of scale up from there? There's so many ways of making money that's it's insane. Like, I have a lot of different like small LLCs that I've started over the years, and it's insane what you can do that does not require college.
And for me, to just add to that, it's ultimately is thankfully. Well, there's again, just to be 100% transparent. In a lot of spaces, credentials still matter, but
Yep.
there are just as many spaces, if not more now, where they don't care about the credentials so much as what do you bring to the table? Like, what can you actually do? And this is, I have two other people asking for advice. I have to schedule a call with them. But ultimately, one specific person, my advice to you is going to be, look, man, you can't find a job. I understand that's hard. But even if it's a job, look, if this is something you really want to pursue, and not just because you feel like society is telling you to do it, even if it means getting a job that you feel is beneath you, take it, right? Unless this is assuming that you still live with your parents because the kid is young, right? Take the job, even if you feel like it's beneath you, because you're going to be able to prove that you have a skill set that is provable,
Yep.
and there's a whole bit of history now, right?
Yeah.
There's a track record for you now. For everyone else, if there are a lot of good things about going to college, right? And a lot of it is social. There's a lot of development there. So I get it, but and a lot of colleges are going to rip into me, and a lot of parents are going to rip into us, I'm sure. But I'm sorry, but college isn't the end all. Like there are people who dropped out of college or didn't even go to college, maybe barely got through high school, and thankfully they had financial education enough
Hmm.
to understand that, you know what, your friend's going to look at you like you're a joke because you're quote unquote nothing but a plumber, right? Dealing with sewage and all this nonsense, and you're nobody, right? Well, while they're racking hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt that they cannot get away from, bankruptcy cannot absolve you of school debt. You're going to be in a situation, but by the time they graduate high school, you should be either at or close to six figures. Now, the other side of this is through the work that I do, we love MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. All those jobs that people, well, I guess if you're the engineering side, fine, you got a gold star, you're amazing, right? But electricians, plumbers, they look at them like you're blue collar, you're blue collar, you're right, you're how smart can you be? Meanwhile, there's an electrician over there that started off, working nonsense construction jobs, and now they're working doing high end electrical work for corporations, pulling in $500,000, and that is just their quarterly pay. Quarterly pay. That is absurd. That is absurd. Meanwhile,
Yep.
their high school buddies saying, "Oh, so you're still working as an electrician, huh?" Yeah. Uh, that's my Bentley outside, by the way. Right. So it's like, I think it really is that semblance of, rather than assessing the steps you feel like you need to do, why don't you assess what is right and what makes sense, right? Like I think
Yep.
like instead of feeding into narratives, for me, I encourage people to just really look underneath the hood and do some real math. Like do some real math.
And you just have to think about it. like in those trades, being a electrician, plumber, you can start your own. Like you're a CPA, right? Like these firms, whatever, you can have your own business. When you're in corporate, you don't own anything. You can be, and this is a whole tangent in itself of, I've been laid off before because they ran out of work at the time. Um, so it when you get laid, I feel like everyone should get laid off at least once to know what it feels like to kind of realize what your worth is in corporations. You need to be self-sustaining, and that's why I have all these different side hustles and why I preach investing and things like that. But you might be all comfortable for your first 2 3 years, and it's like, especially out of college, and you're like, wow, this is awesome. I don't even know what the starting salary nowadays is like. Let's say you're like 60 70K, you know out of school, and then you're like, wow, I'm rich. So then you start spending money on everything, and you feel comfortable, and guess what, a plane crashes. The door 737, at Boeing, I went through just recently. I didn't get laid off this time, but we went through furloughs and then 5% workforce reduction on top of the whole economy, with everything going on in the economy, with interest rates and things like that. That put even more pressure on, having enough cash reserves, cash flow for corporations where, well, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're getting paid too much, or um, you're too much for overhead. We need to cut you off. We
You
need
need to right
workforce
size.
reduction. Yes. So it's one of those things where, and it's funny because when I was still at Boeing, uh, I think the team was about like 12 people. Most of them were out of college or young. I would give them a lot of advice. Some would take it, some would not. But the ones who don't, they were the ones who were too comfortable. And when layoff time came around, they were so scared. And I'm like, for me, I was like, I mean, yes, I went through before, and um, you know, I have a lot safer, well prepared. But I was kind of like, okay, if I get laid off, then whatever. I know I will be able to, one, find a job, or I know what to do with my money. I have enough investments and stuff that I can live off of it, right? Have that nest egg. Um, but it's one of those things where you, if you did not go through that and you weren't mentally prepared and you don't have a goal of being financially independent, I think you need to get laid off. Sorry, but these people, they just need to wake up. Like, yeah. Like I just don't understand. You need to learn how to be self-sufficient and not and realize that corporations, that anyone is replaceable. Um, I kind of, it's funny, my director who I was talking about, he was very very integral to the project that we were working on Air Force One, and everyone was kind of like scared that he was going out on paternity leave for about a month and a half, and everyone was like, "Oh crap, what are we going to do?" Um, he left. Everything still ran smoothly, and in the back of my head, I was like, "See, it wasn't so bad." But that also means that anyone really can be replaced. Like, it obviously much better to have him there, and everyone that's working on it. But it's one of those things where, when you're in a corporation, anyone really can be replaced, and you need to wake up and know how to be self-sufficient financially, and know how to manage your money and be financially literate, which I think most people are not right now.
And for me, that's it's funny. You and I seem to talk the same talking points. I mean, but for me, the one thing that I do add is we've been around the block a couple times, and so nowadays it's weird for me because I feel like it just happened almost suddenly. Where a lot of the people that we work with are like young. Like most people are like, oh, relax, it's not that big of a difference. For me, it is because the stages in life are significantly different. You're talking about kids in the mid to late 20s, maybe like
Yep.
just getting to their 30s. I'm gonna be 40 soon, right? So again, I understand it's not that big of a change. Trust me, when I look at them and have the conversations, there's a big difference in where they are in life. And so for me, there've been these iterations where look, there's a very good chance that either me or a lot of us are gonna be replaced. And for me, there's a good chance that the way I approach my work is I almost work myself out of a job, right? I do things, I want to implement systems, and hopefully you don't need me. And if it bites me in the rear, so be it. And like, oh, don't say that. I'm like, look, you need to do something. Divorce yourself from the emotion and the reality of what corporate is, right?
That's funny that you say that because I've said that exact sentence a lot, and especially in engineering, I told people if you're not working yourself out of a job, then you're not doing a good job. I told that because, especially for engineering, you're about creating efficiency, you're creating solutions, right? You should be creating ways so that you don't have to do the actual work. And that kind of goes back to, you know, a lot of people who talk about owning businesses and stuff. You have to be able to work on the business instead of in the business. So it's kind, in that same vein, it's a little bit similar. We were working on things to make things more efficient, to reduce to lag time, downtime, or anything. But anything to make operations more efficient. That's what that's the value that you should be bringing. And because if you can do that in one scenario, you should be able to solve problems and it's a thought process. It's not just strictly this is what you know and this is all you can do. But no, it's a how do you think to solve problems? But yeah, I've told so many people you need to be working yourself out of a job.
Yeah, and there's gonna come a time where I think you get confused because you work with people and you might have good rapport and relationships with people. But again, those are your colleagues, those are your coworkers. That is not the corporation. Corporation, as far as
Right.
you don't get it twisted. You will always be replaceable. And
Yep.
and again, I think a lot of that comes with a sense of betrayal or whatever. I'm like, you shouldn't, you shouldn't. Like I mean, in my early years, I did, right? I was like, f this company, f them, da 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 da. It's a company. It's what it's supposed to do. They're doing what they're supposed to do, right? And so
Yeah.
if you just accept a reality and without adding on the emotional portion of it, just understand like you are replaceable and that's okay, right? For me, what's more important is what have you done to make sure that you are more marketable for anything else, right?
Right.
And so one of the things here is it does highlight into the thing is what are your contingency plans? And so for me, I agree with you in that school teaches you a lot of useless things. And the one thing that I wish that we did teach was financial literacy, financial education, right? And
Yep.
that is something.
I even thought about starting my own course to sell to universities of, hey, if you're not teaching this in class, why don't you purchase this? It's all on one package of like extracurricular for to prepare uh, students who are about to go into real world how to handle financials, like W-2s, W-4s. How many exemptions are you claiming? Like how is taxes even calculated? Like the fact that this is a whole different rabbit hole again, but the fact that most Americans look forward to getting a tax return at the end of the year, I'm like, do you know what a tax return is? You just lend the government money at zero interest to do whatever they want, and then you're just getting the rest. Yeah. I'm like, that's your money
Mhm,
with that you're collecting no interest on.
mhm.
You should not be happy that you're getting a tax
Yep.
return. But
And then
things like that,
they get upset.
I
Oh,
definitely have
I
thought
wanted
about.
thousands of dollars more. I'm like, dude, no, that's not that. I want to owe the government money every year. That is my
Yeah,
goal. I mean, hopefully
yeah,
not enough to where
like
there's
not too
penalties.
much, but
Right,
still.
right. Like, and I still have friends that just can't get that out of their heads. Like they keep asking
Yeah,
me, hey, like how do I do this? I'm like, first and foremost, understand one thing: the government are the world's biggest gangsters. Don't get this twisted. The IRS are the people that used to walk around people's businesses and say, knock, knock, I need my weekly protection money. I don't know. Shut up. You owe me money. Do not,
yep,
do not, do not play with the government. Do not play with their money. Don't play that game. You play
yep,
stupid games, you will win absolutely stupid prizes. Don't do it. Just don't do it, right? My recommendation is learn how the game is played. Understand where the
yeah,
tax law provides you incentives for doing certain things. That's what I mean. That's the way I explain it to people is what the tax law is. It's not something that is punitive. It's a playbook. It's a
yeah,
playbook. It's a playbook on because it's meant to manipulate behavior, right? And if you want to think theoretically, it's meant to influence behavior that they arguably understand that they are not good or adept at, right? And so they give you incentives for you to do it, like things like running businesses, providing
yep,
housing, investing in said corporations, and making sure that the GDP goes up, right?
Yeah.
Things like so. If you think of it that way, and right now, I mean, I don't care what side of the aisle, and I don't even care to discuss whether you think it's a good idea or bad. But one of the things is like they realize that children need to get born. So,
Yeah.
because look at what we're gonna do. We're gonna give the kid $1,000, essentially a mutual fund, right?
Yeah.
So that you could have more babies. Again, politics and all that. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying this is what they're doing.
Yeah. Yep. I know about that. Yeah.
If you're gonna take that lens, then what does it mean? It means own businesses, own assets, right? Stop consuming your wealth, build it, build wealth, right? And what, but for me, the other side of it is, I think we like if you even if you go one step below, how do you manage finances? Like when you get a paycheck, how much should you save? How much should you put away? How much should you put on your credit card? Right? Because I think when you talk to most people, and the reason why, and I talk to people from other countries, they're like, our country do not have rewards or benefits like you Americans do. I'm like, I know, because in this country, they know that despite all of the rewards and benefits, and all that, they make that much more because people are not intelligent enough to understand, hey, you need to pay this credit card bill off. That
Yep.
statement balance needs to get paid off, or you're gonna pay 18, 20+%. That's where they make their money.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where people, I don't understand. People will look at, oh yeah, my monthly payment is low. I'm like, but your interest rate is like 20%. That APR is huge. You're gonna be paying that forever. Like how, like the fact that credit fixing companies, whatever, the fact that they exist is like mind blowing to me too. But yeah, I like credit card education is definitely is needed. But it's one of those things where you don't, you're being taught, especially in universities and stuff, like you're being taught by the system. Like this is not to be all like tinfoil hat, whatever, like conspiracy stuff, but I know people who go to school to learn entrepreneurship, like an entrepreneurship major or something. I'm like, are you serious? You're learning entrepreneurship from a person who's not an entrepreneur. You're learning it from the system that's telling you to essentially not be an entrepreneur, but be an entrepreneur. I like there's a lot of things like just realize who you get advice from.
If it's one thing, it goes right back to problem solving. One of the problem solving skills in this particular case is learning to look behind the curtain, right? It's like, I mean, look, we're victims of it too, and I'm still gonna fall for it here and there, right? It's just human nature and whatever. But for me, ultimately, it goes down to go do the thing, go get kicked in the teeth, get punched in the gut, right? Get get berated, get belittled, get right, and find out that, oh, I thought this was the next get rich quick scheme, and I realized that I just burned $10,000. Well, hopefully in your younger years, because in your 20s, again, like losses in your 20s don't really mean amount to much, right? Like you lose it in your 30s, 40s plus. That's gonna hurt. Make your mistakes when you're young,
Yeah.
you know. And
Yeah, and those are two things I've thought about, even before coming here, is that if there was one lesson that I wish I had learned or someone told me is fail often and fail early. Like those, that $1,000 or whatever that you lose because you actually tried something that could generate more wealth in the future, you can recover from that early on. And just like you said, like later on, it's going to be a little bit harder. But it's one of those things where not just monetary wise, but fail. Just learn how to fail because the ability to recover from failure is something that needs to be taught and done early on because if and that's where perfectionists and stuff like some people claim to be perfectionists and they have some sort of they feel good that they are trying to be a perfectionist. Where I'm on the other side of like, that's horrible. Like that means you're not growing. You're not shooting or you're not putting yourself in situations where you're able to grow enough. Because there's the whole saying I used to have this on my Instagram Instagram tagline before about you shoot for the stars and you land on the clouds or land on the moon kind of thing where if you had a goal set in mind of like say $1 million annually as your financial goal and you work to get there and even if you don't hit that goal but and you fall short, let's say you fall short and it's like, oh wow, you're at 500K a year. It's like, oh no, I didn't make my goal, but you're at 500K. But if you made that goal 500K to begin with, you probably would land at like 200K. There's this element of, it's like this whole rubber band thing of like, you need to set far out goals because the work ethic that you put in will help you to try to land somewhere close to that goal. And even if it doesn't, that amount of work that you put in to achieve this insane goal will land you a lot further than you would anywhere else. There's a serial entrepreneur that I follow. You might even know him, Grant Cardone. There's a book that he has called the 10x rule. It's kind of like the same concept as like 10x your efforts, 10x everything, and even if you don't get there, 10x results, you might get somewhere close. It's better to have tried and gotten a little bit closer than set a realistic goal, or like if your end of the year goal is like, okay, I'm gonna make $500 this year, from whatever way, and you hit it. It's like, but you could probably make way more if you push yourself a lot more, right? So I think not just financials, but everything in life is like, you need to push yourself in order to see success. And I feel like nowadays we're in a little bit of like this snowflake kind of world, like the fact that now I'm starting to sound old too. It's like, hey, you got a participation award kind of thing. Like, no, you need to learn how to lose. You need to learn how to fail, or else you'll never get anywhere in life. You just build up that grit. Go out there, be angry because you couldn't do something, and get better. Have that Mamba mentality. It actually gets me pretty riled up. Like that whole mindset of, you need to push yourself in order to get anywhere. You can't just get handed everything in life, right? Um, it's you know, it's yeah, Kobe and the whole Mamba mentality. It really is something good to live by to me.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are varying degrees, but for me, I agree in that what I and maybe it's beneficial for me and my kids, but I told my wife, look, my kids only have to be a little more grittier. Like they just have to be a little grittier than the next kid,
Hmm.
right? Like and they're gonna win. They're gonna win, right? And it's for me. It's like I get it. We all like naturally we want to head towards comfort and safety. That is a natural instinct, but without that, you get complacency. You get,
Yep.
and for me, I'm realizing you also get mental issues. You get anxiety. You get depression. You need purpose. You need something that'll
Yeah.
drive you and say, I might fail today, but you also need to understand that it's not necessarily a reflection of you as a person if you fail. Like in terms of like you don't need to do emotional damage to yourself to realize, hey, I failed. Right? For me, it's just like, okay, that just means this didn't work. Now what? Like for me, problem solving. What? Forget the failure portion for a split second. Where did things go wrong? What do I need to
Right.
improve? What do I need to give up? Like where do I assess? That's an assessment tool. It's a diagnostic. It's not
Yeah.
it's not you're a failure. You're a piece of crap. You want to do that? Be your own David Goggins, fine, right? But it's like at the very least, you need discomfort. You need pressure points. You need to understand these things because it's a natural diagnostics tool.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
But Jesus, it's already an hour, and for me, I do want to get into because my understand like I've seen you for years post little tidbits in terms of like stock trades and finance stuff, and I think we're gonna have to table that for another one. And I think I know
Yeah.
someone
That's a long story.
it's a long story. So for now, we'll wrap this one up. And I do like to wrap up with a question. You get to pick the time and whatever phase it was, but if you had to tell your younger self anything, when would it be, and what would you tell him?
This kind of goes back to the what I was mentioning earlier about taking risks and stuff, is that eventually I want to say maybe in right before starting college, I think, is take the risk. Take the risk and be willing to fail. Take the risk and maybe you lose some money, or maybe you wasted a little bit of time, but you have so much ahead of you that it's much more painful, like in your later years, and looking back and thinking, what if I did this? What if I did that? Don't care about what people think at the time. It's easy to say now, but it's and you'll hear that kind of advice from other people too, but like the whole trying and failing, it really is a self-diagnostic tool. You really do need to be able to fail enough, fail early, fail often, or else you'll never advance, both professionally, personally, anything. It kind of goes back to, inventing the light bulb and how many times did Edison fail? And it's like advancements as a whole and human society advancements, it's one of those things where if you if enough people did not fail, we wouldn't be where we are, right? So learn how to problem solve. Don't be afraid of failure because the biggest pain in the future would be regret.
Well, Jimmy, I do thank you for your time. And for those who might want to reach out, where can they find you?
Uh, you guys can connect with me on LinkedIn. I think you'll either post a profile or um, you should be able to find me on LinkedIn. I also have Instagram and Facebook, but LinkedIn and Instagram are probably my two biggest ones.
Okay, so I'll leave the link in the description somewhere.
All right, sounds good.
So, Jimmy, thank you for your time, and I'll catch you guys on the
Yep,
next one.
thank you. It was fun. All right, talk to you later.
Peace.
See ya.